We were no longer living in Florida. We had moved to California, and Dad was the minister of a church there. And we lived about 4 blocks from the Hollywood racetrack. Now, we didn't live in Hollywood. We lived in Inglewood. And why they had the Hollywood racetrack in Inglewood, I don't know. But that's where it was. And during the racing season, it was really bad news because people would come in, tramps would sleep, sometimes on the ground outside of your house. We had to lock up the prayer room at the church because people would come in and put newspapers over them, and you might come thinking you were going to pray and there'd be somebody in there. Dad hated that racetrack. He knew that there were men who lost their fortunes and didn't have the money to feed their families, lost what they needed to pay on the mortgage of the house, sometimes lost their businesses, became tramps. He knew that the racetrack was a terrible thing of the devil. Well, one night during racing season, all of us had gone to bed, and my brother Jim was working in a filling station, a gas station, and so he didn't come in until late at night. And all of a sudden that night he came running into the house, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Dad, Dad, the racetrack's on fire. The whole sky is ablaze." My daddy jumped out of bed, slid into his bedroom slippers, grabbed his bathrobe, didn't change into his clothes, and out the door he went in his pajamas to the racetrack. Well, now the rest of us stopped to get dressed a little better than that, and when we got to the racetrack, we couldn't find Dad. There were fire trucks and police cars and just tons of people all standing around, and that track, the stands had caught on fire, and it was a tremendous blaze. Well, then we found my dad. He was standing right up against the racetrack fence, and he had his legs spread, his hands behind his back, and in his bathrobe, pajamas, and bedroom slippers, he was singing at the top of his lungs, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow." Well, that's the only time I ever remember hoping that nobody knew he was my dad. And then we got worried because we were afraid the police would arrest him, thinking he'd been the one who had set the track on fire. So when we persuaded him that it was going to burn down without his musical accompaniment, and we went back to the house, we were sitting around the living room talking about the fire. And my youngest brother, Jack, said, "Dad, what were you doing singing the Doxology? We were afraid they'd arrest you for burning down the track." And Dad said, "I did burn it down, son." And there was silence in the room. My dad was a man of honor. He was a man of honesty and truth. And Dad said, "Son, I've been praying for months that God would destroy that instrument of the devil, and tonight he answered my prayers and burned it to the ground." And as far as my father was concerned, he was personally responsible through his prayers for setting the racetrack on fire.